And while I was away, I was reading a story in a local newspaper in Hawaii about a guy who'd gotten sick from the hotel where he was an employee. And he blamed the mold in the building. He developed adult onset asthma and all these allergies that he'd never had before. And it was like my life in reverse. So I called my father and I said, "Do you think we had a mold problem at Old Trenton Road?" And he just laughed. He said, "Of course, we had mushrooms in the basement. Why do you ask?" Typical 70s parent, right? And so I said, "Well, do you think that's what made me sick?" And he said, "Well, it certainly couldn't have helped." And, looking back at it now, we had a damp, musty basement, and whenever it rained, the water came through it. And I still remember that heavy feeling when I was down in the basement. So the pieces of the puzzle really came together for me in that instant. It really was one of those aha moments. And I became fascinated with the idea that the buildings we live and work in can make you sick.
Welcome to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter. Please join us on our mission to better a billion brains. Enjoy the episode and remember to share it with your family and friends. Hello, welcome back to the Brain Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Porter, and today we have a very special guest, someone we've been speaking on the same stages for years. I finally cornered him and said, "Hey, we need to get you on the show and tell the Brain Tap Nation about mold and how it's affecting the brain, but it's really affecting every part of the body." And he's going to talk today about hidden invaders, understanding mold, and maybe even talk a little bit about parasites and things of that nature that's going on in the body. But really, we're talking about the name of your business has got mold because people don't even realize that, right? So, Jason, Earle, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what got you into this business? Because I know as a child, you're laying in bed and you said, "Man, I want to get into the mold business." So tell us a little bit about what got you started and how you're impacting people's health in ways that they can't even imagine because they don't even know it's happening. They're going all over the world trying to get fixed. They go back to their home and they're sitting in mold. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. And indeed, it's been a lot of fun being at the conferences with you, and I've really enjoyed your message. It's been a real honor, and it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you. So yes, my story actually does interestingly start when I was about 4 years old. I didn't wake up one day and say that I want to be in the mold business, but I did wake up one day and I was having a hard time breathing. I had lost a lot of weight over a 3-week period, and my parents had been growing increasingly concerned. And so they went to the pediatrician with me, and he said, "You really need to take him to the hospital. This looks pretty serious." And so we ended up at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is a renowned respiratory clinic. And the initial diagnosis based upon the symptoms I was presenting with and my family history was cystic fibrosis. So back then that was a death sentence. And my father had lost 4 of his cousins to CF before the age of 14. So that was their worst nightmare coming true. So thankfully, 6 weeks later, they got a second opinion. And it turns out I don't have CF, didn't have CF, evidenced by the fact that I'm here at 47 years old. Rather, what I had was asthma compounded by pneumonia. And when they tested me for allergies, I was positive for every single thing that they tested me for. So it was grass, wheat, corn, eggs, dogs, cats, even cotton. So my clothes were itchy my whole childhood. And when I was about 12 years old, my folks split up, which was good for everyone involved. And so I moved out of that old farmhouse, and suddenly all my symptoms went away. I never had to use an inhaler again, and I'm no longer allergic to anything. And so it was one of those things that they just chalked up to spontaneous adolescent remission, which is a technical term where we have no idea what the hell happened. And so I just moved on with my life. My grandfather had grown out of his asthma, so it was just one of those things. And fast forward a couple of years later, my mother passed away suddenly by suicide, actually, which is relevant to the story. And then a year after that, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. And so I missed a lot of school. And so I was essentially forced to drop out. And I ended up taking full-time hours at the gas station to save money. I was going to get my GED and start college a year early. And usually that's where the stories end, but this is where the story kind of began. I ended up getting recruited by a stockbroker who worked on Wall Street, and he came through the gas station all the time. And so he recruited me to come be a stockbroker trainee. And so at 16 years old, I started working on Wall Street. A year later, I ended up with my stockbroker's license, which unknowingly made me the youngest licensed stockbroker in history, with a Guinness World Record. Total fairy tale. That was not the track I was on. And I did that for 9 years. And towards the end, I became frustrated with the fact that I really wasn't I wasn't scratching a deep itch that my mother had really cultivated within me, which is to contribute to the greater good. And she gave to a fault, quite frankly. Um, and so one day I woke up and I wasn't having fun anymore. I decided to go on walkabout. And so I went traveling, and while I was away, I walked away from Wall Street completely, sold all my stuff, and put 20 pounds of necessary items in a backpack. And while I was away, I was reading a story in a local newspaper in Hawaii about a guy who'd gotten sick from the hotel where he was an employee. And he blamed the mold in the building. He developed adult onset asthma and all these allergies that he'd never had before. And it was like my life in reverse. So I became fascinated with this. And I called my father and I said, "Do you think we had a mold problem at Old Trenton Road?" And he just laughed. He said, "Of course, we have mushrooms in the basement. Why do you ask?" Typical 70s parent, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, do you think that's what made me sick?" And he said, "Well, it certainly couldn't have helped." And looking back at it now, we had a damp, musty basement, and whenever it rained, the water came through it. And I still remember that heavy feeling when I was down in the basement. And I always felt better when I was outside. So the pieces of the puzzle really came together for me in that instant. It really was one of those aha moments, and I became fascinated with the idea that the buildings we live and work in can make you sick. It's just a simple idea, and it's not news to anybody, most people these days. But back then, that was 21 years ago. Kind of hard to believe. And so I ended up coming to this space from a position of really significant curiosity, more than anything else. And so I took a job working for a mold remediation company in the sales side, and quickly saw that they were really not leaving houses as healthy as they should, and ended up deciding to go into the assessment side, knowing that one day the industry would be sort of bifurcated between assessment and remediation. And that's where I really got my education. I ended up stumbling across the use of mold sniffing dogs, believe it or not, which is just brilliant enough to seem crazy. But my dog Oreo ended up teaching me where mold hides, and so we ended up with just an incredible business of healing sick homes, which ended up on lots and lots of national TV. But over the years, I became frustrated with the fact that the people who really needed us the most couldn't afford assessments, professional assessments, which can be $1,000, $2,000 or more. So in recent years, we worked hard to democratize the healthy home through the development of an at-home test kit, which we launched about a year and a half ago at gotmold.com. So that brings us to where we are today.
Right. And you've got a special promotion for Brain Tap 2 for that. So we're going to be talking about that today. So in the show notes will be links. You can get a discount on that. Can you tell us just a little bit about that since you brought it up? I don't want people to be thinking, I don't want to, I mean, we want them to, if they want to go there now and start looking at it, and we're going to break down what mold is, what it does to your brain, what it does to your body. I mean, you already said a lot of people out there, it seems like everybody's allergic to everything today. So it could be, this could be part of the equation, but tell us a little bit about what they're going to get when they go to your website and how they
Sure.
get
Yeah, so we put together a welcome page for your listeners at gotmold.com/braintap. And there you'll find an ebook, which is filled with inspection checklists and FAQs about mold. So it's really useful for anyone who's new in their mold awareness journey. And there's also a coupon code there for anyone who's interested in our test kits. But so the reason that we created the kit, and we'll get into the importance of mold, and why testing is so important, and also why it's so difficult to navigate. But if you wanted to have your house tested for mold right now, you'd presumably hire a professional. And again, the budget can be an issue for a lot of people. And if you're renting, it's almost impossible because sometimes the landlord won't even let you, or it can even eclipse the cost of your rent. So for those reasons, we decided to create an affordable at-home kit. So if you wanted to have a professional come over and they did an inspection, at the end of the inspection, they would have identified areas of concern, and they will come up with a sampling or a testing strategy. And usually they'll come out with an air sampling pump and air sampling cassettes known as spore traps, and they'll test the air. And those tests are expensive, and then there's lots of potential concerns about conflicts of interest with professional inspectors. So what we did is we created an at-home, the same exact method that professionals use, but in a much more consumer-friendly way. So for those of us who are watching, I'm holding an air sampling pump. This duplicates a professional pump exactly, $1,000 calibrated device. We make ours for a lot less, obviously. And it interfaces with these cassettes, which are the industry standard test devices, again called spore traps. And they affix onto the pump, which runs for 5 minutes in each area that you want to sample. There's an outside sample, which is where we actually understand what's going on in your environment in the area where you live. And then you send them back to us in a prepaid return mailer, kind of like 23andMe, but for mold, right? So we send you the sample collection kit, and then you send it in a prepaid mailer. And then within 3 business days of the lab, they send the data through our system, and then you get a beautifully formatted report, which tells you the types of mold found, in what concentrations, as well as background debris and some other important indicators about indoor air quality, as well as action steps. So how to find an inspector, how to find a remediator in your area. We have a very strict no conflict of interest policy, so we have nothing else to sell. We're here to provide knowledge and tools to help make people make better decisions about the air they breathe. But the biggest problem with mold, which is really why we created it, is that, quite frankly, testing is cost prohibitive for most people. And so this is not a replacement for a professional inspection. I want to make that clear. This is a cost-effective first step. Right. This is a way for people who are somewhere between the $20 test kits at Home Depot that don't work and the $2,000 or $1,000 inspections. There's a big chasm there. And so what we wanted to do was give people a stepping stone so that they could raise awareness or raise their own awareness about this, and then possibly use this as leverage to be able to affect change, engage a partner who's maybe a little bit reluctant or skeptical, or maybe a landlord or a boss or someone else who they need to have sort of buy-in or solidarity with as they begin this process of recapturing their health and peace of mind.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people who think, well, my house hasn't been flooded. I don't think I got mold. I don't, all these things. What would you say to somebody about that? I mean, what are the typical case studies you see where people get the test kit and they find out, hey, wow, I can't believe I got mold, but I got mold, and then they were able to remediate it or move or whatever they needed to do? Tell us from the beginning how that all works.
Well, so, at its essence, mold is a moisture problem, right? A mold problem is a moisture problem. And so, but those moisture problems aren't always so obvious. They're not always due to a direct flood or an obvious leak. You can have just ambient high humidity for just a few days and end up with a mold problem. In fact, by the time you see mold, it's already been growing for quite some time. So what I always say is, if you see something, smell something, or feel something, do something. And so what we're looking for is not always visible mold. It's actually the signs of moisture. That's the big clue. And so that's, staining, discolorations, obviously visible mold, but blistering paint, water bugs, even spider webs. Those are the first clues that you've got an imbalance that can lead to mold growth. And it's important to recognize those things quickly, because it only takes 24 to 48 hours for mold to grow. And then if you smell something, that's a big deal too, because that's the clear indication that mold is actually growing, and that's the metabolism producing that musty smell. And then, of course, if you feel something, and those are the symptoms that tend to be sort of transient, that get better when you leave the house. So a lot of homes don't have the outward manifestation of a flood or a leak, like I said, some really significant, observable phenomenon that would be like, okay, you have a problem. But those slight clues can often be the things that you need in order for you to cobble together sort of a hypothesis that we may have something that we need to attend to here.
Right. Besides the fact that, like what happened with you with the allergies and things, what are some of the things that somebody sitting there that maybe has tried everything to get rid of some kind of symptoms they have? What are some of the symptoms that might be showing up? Especially, a lot of people call it actually mold brain, that you hear about all the time. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating, because I think most people who are sort of new to this think about mold as sort of this upper respiratory thing mostly, right? Sneezing, asthma, coughing, dermal reactions, hives and things like that, upper respiratory and allergic. But most mold-related illness actually presents as cognitive impairment, brain fog, really, or mold brain, as you say. And that's actually really the mechanism behind that is poorly understood. But it looks like the data that's emerging is showing that the musty smell itself is actually probably the operative mechanism, that the exposure to the musty smell, which are VOCs. So anyone who's familiar with volatile organic compounds, man-made VOCs our buildings are riddled with them from the paints and finishes and personal care products and cleaning products that we use in our very tight buildings. But microbes, mold and bacteria, when they're growing, also produce VOCs. And those are essentially, if you look at them closely, they look a lot like industrial solvents. And so we know that some VOCs, like alcohol, create, cognitive impairment. And so breathing VOCs will also do the same thing. And, we breathe 13 to 15 times a minute, which comes out to 20,000 times a day. And so you have to look at those 20,000 breaths as doses. And you have to look at them as cumulative because they are, right? We are not just breathing air. We're actually consuming it. My father used to say, buy a filter or be a filter. And I love that because that's essentially what we are. And so those VOCs can be from the man-made side of things as well. And the microbial side can really do a doozy on your immune system as well as your nervous system and your cognition. And so the other thing that happens a lot with mold exposure is inflammation, which of course also can have an impact on your brain and on cognition, right? So mold really affects you in almost every single way. The mycotoxins are multi-system, the VOCs are multi-system, and then of course the spores themselves can trigger a whole cascade of responses too. So in essence, there's really no area of health that mold and indoor air quality don't touch. I like to say that the mold is the great interrupter. So the immune system is like a juggler; it can juggle thousands of processes, and with great elegance. And mold is like a guy throwing baseballs at the juggler. He's going to have to make a decision here, or she's going to. Am I going to defend myself from this evolutionary threat, or am I going to keep these processes going? And my experience has been that the immune system drops the balls to protect. It drops the basic processes in order to protect itself from the mold. And until that mold gets corrected, most of those processes don't get back up to speed very easily.
Mm-hmm. So most people don't realize that that all odor has mass. If you can smell it, there's a mass coming in, and so obviously your body has to process that, like you're saying. That's scary if you live next to a paper mill or something. People don't realize that. So tell us a little bit about like a case study. Let's say that I'm having some issues. I want to get this test kit. I bring it to my home. How easy is it to implement? And you said it takes 2 to 3 days once we return it back to you to get the information back. Tell me about the process.
Sure. So when you order a kit, all shipping is included, and so you'll generally speaking get the kit within a couple of days. We encourage people to close up their building for 2 or 3 days because you don't want to test the outdoor air. You want to test the outdoor air outside. You don't want to test the outdoor air inside. So we want to make sure the windows and doors are closed for a couple of days so you get an accurate reading. Ideally, you follow the ebook, which gives you the inspection process. So you go through your home and look for areas of concern. You're going to focus on places where you have symptoms, where there's been a history of water damage or odors. So you're looking for musty smells. You're looking for places where there's been any sort of dampness or any indication of dampness, and then of course where there's any known mold. You'll collect the outdoor air sample first, and again that's important as a reference or a baseline because molds are different from time to time, from minute to minute, quite frankly, outside, and also from climate to climate. And then you'll test in the areas that you've identified during that initial walkthrough. Each sample, again, is 5 minutes. So we sell 1, 2, and 3 room kits. So the maximum you'd be really doing the sampling itself is about 20 minutes. You put everything back in the prepaid mailer, and then you ship it off. Now, when you get the report, we're looking for any indication of microbial diversity. So in other words, we're looking for different kinds of molds and different concentrations than what we find outside, because that's clearly indicative of mold growth in the building. So in terms of case studies, in terms of the kinds of people that typically use this, obviously anybody is presenting with symptoms, but a lot of people do this for peace of mind. We have a lot of expectant moms that are using our kit. They're sort of test their nest. We've got obviously people that have acute concerns about asthma, COPD, significant upper respiratory. But the vast majority of people who are doing this have a slight inclination. They've got a sneaking suspicion that something is going on. And usually what's happening is a couple of people are presenting with some symptoms in the home. And there's usually one sort of the most sensitive person who's got the most significant issues. But what's interesting is that you may have 5 people living in a house and they all have 5 different symptom profiles. And some of the most common ones are sort of an exacerbation of actually an autoimmune disorder that may not have been an issue before, right? Some things percolate to the surface that seem new or disconcerting. In terms of the way that data is then interpreted, what we're looking for is obviously any sort of imbalance. We're going to hone in on the source of the moisture. So if in fact there is anything that's unusual, the second step there is to identify where the moisture is coming from, whether it's from a leak or whether it's from high humidity or a combination thereof. And then if that's beyond your ability to identify yourself, that's when we generally recommend that you engage the service of a professional to help do that diagnostic. Again, the test kit's not designed to be a replacement for it. It's designed to be able to give you a safe and affordable way to take that first step, gather some information, and be able to plan out your approach.
I know on your website, gotmold.com, you can go there. You have a learning center. They a lot of different information in there. Some of the things that come to mind when I went there and kind of did some research just on my own, because we always have people having problems. Like, it really amazed me. You have something there about Lyme disease and mold. So tell me a little bit about what mold does to, if somebody already has maybe some kind of immune deficiency, what's happening in their body at that point?
Well, the relationship between Lyme and mold is also somewhat poorly understood, but the general belief around this is that it has to do with an overload of biotoxins in the body, and certain people have a difficulty releasing those toxins. There's a genetic mutation, MTHFR mutation that may affect as much as 25% of the population that inhibits this detoxification process. And so, and there's also some research pointing to the idea of antibiotics, which are, by the way, mycotoxins or endotoxins in most cases, very concentrated pills that are produced by these microbes, that they may be triggering a sensitivity to mold as well. But what happens is Lyme patients tend to have a disproportionately high sensitivity to mold exposure, and also people with chronic mold exposure and mold sickness tend to end up with chronic Lyme symptoms if they have Lyme. And so it's sort of a Venn diagram, if you will. So who knows why these things tend to magnetically attract each other. It certainly feels that way, especially when you talk to the Limeys and the Moldies. They kind of feel as if they're being targeted here. But what it comes down to is this sort of overload, or what people call the allostatic load, this toxin load that builds up within us, and then mold or the Lyme tends to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so until you get out of that moldy environment, which is the thing you can control in that scenario, until you get to a clean environment, what happens is people just generally don't get much better. This tends to really bog them down. And the irony of it is that this combination of symptoms, or this combination of afflictions, tends to keep people in their home. And in the very place that's making them sick. So it takes an extraordinary amount of effort to be able to get out of that environment, to find a place where they can allow their body to find equilibrium and then be able to hopefully process these things in a way that doesn't require professional intervention. But oftentimes, it takes the care of a functional practitioner, functional medical practitioner, who can help coax those toxins out of the body. But in all cases, the key element to this is that people, until they get their environment straight, and I would also argue their diet straight, because the data around mycotoxins in food is very strong. Up to 60 to 80% of imported grains are contaminated with mycotoxins. And conventional meats and dairy are also loaded with mycotoxins because these animals are fed moldy grains. So if you really were to look at it, you'd say you got to get your air and your food straight. And then I would also say attitude, because there's a lot of fear around this, and I've also never seen anybody get better when they're really scared about the subject, right? So there's air, food, and attitude, and those things are each one of them is sort of a heavy lift. But that's sort of the path that I've seen for the Lyme and mold patients that tends to work.
Yeah. One of the things in your learning site, and there's a lot of information there. You need to go to godmold.com, check out their learning center. But you had an article in there that I thought was pretty amazing, because a lot of people think, well, I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to get some kind of biocide, I'm going to go get something to kill this mold off. And you actually have an article in there that says, say no to this. Tell me, there are a lot of neat freaks out there, or people who are maybe a little scared of mold, and they're may be contaminating their environment by trying to clean it. So tell us a little bit about that, and what's the process? Because there's always those people out there that think they have a better way because they can go buy the mold killer or whatever it is, the different things, and you have a whole article about it. So tell us, maybe summarize that for us here.
Yeah, so mold remediation, the definition is remedy, which means to actually fix or to cure. And so remediare in Latin is where remediation comes from. And the cure to mold the cure to mold is actually moisture control. So the first step is to fix the moisture, always, always, always. Otherwise, you're just going to it's like you got to turn off the water before you start mopping up the floor. And so that's first. And then remediation, according to the industry standard and best practices, it means to remove the affected building materials and then to clean the affected surfaces in the areas where the mold is identified. So killing mold actually doesn't do anything except for to add a step and to add a toxin to the environment. Even if you're using quote unquote natural killer, you're still leaving behind dead mold, and dead mold is still allergenic and potentially toxigenic. And so the purpose of remediation is to actually reduce the fungal load to an acceptable level, not to destroy it or kill it. So anytime you see air purifiers or air cleaners that have kill claims, those are also not recommended. Anytime you see anything where they're talking about they're just going to kill or annihilate or zap or whatever, there's all these shortcuts around mold. And that's why they're made, is because they're very lucrative, these shortcuts, but they're completely ineffective. And what's interesting also is that if the mold is a toxigenic mold, which means that it produces these very potent chemical toxins that it uses to inhibit the growth of other microbes in its area, right? So these are very competitive organisms. If you spray a mold killer onto one of the toxigenic species, the data on this is fascinating. It produces more toxins. It fights back. So if you're really worried about mold, the last thing you want to do is try to fight it with it. It's got better chemicals. It's got a lot more time on its hands, and it's been doing this for a while. And the other thing is that a lot of these chemicals that are being used, or even the natural ones, there's one that's made with thyme oil, which smells just like what you'd imagine. It smells like thyme, the herb. They often leave behind residues. Some of them are hormone modulators, but some of them have a very potent odor that does not go away. And so I've had homes that get remediated where the mold has been removed, but the lingering odor from the remediation chemicals actually makes the home unlivable. So they just went from out of the frying pan into the fire. So there's really no need to kill mold. There's no need to use any sort of chemicals during remediation. It's very counterintuitive. This is exactly the opposite of what you'll find in 99% of your web searches. But this is how it's been articulated in the industry standard and best practices, and it's something that we adhere to very closely.
That's great. Well, at BrainTap here, when we look at how many times people listen to sessions on our app, which we have 2,000 of them, then in the top 10 is always sleep. sleep seems to be a big issue. And you wrote a whole article about, hey, what's going on in the bedroom? With 2/3 of the world not sleeping well, it could be a mold problem. So tell us a little bit about what your solution is for helping people sleep better. You have a whole, and if they want to read the whole article, of course, it's there on your website. But I thought that was a good piece of information as well. So maybe you can share some of that with the listeners.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the funny thing about mold symptoms is that it affects the entire spectrum. So we have people who can't sleep because of mold exposure. They experience some tremendous insomnia, night terrors. This is what happens to me. If I go to a moldy hotel, if there's a musty smell, I have the worst nightmares all night, and it's unbelievable. There's other people that can't get out of bed. They can't get enough sleep. So it's the entire spectrum. And so we have an entire sort of list of suggested recommendations for how to have a healthy bedroom. Of course, you want to make sure that you're controlling moisture. Mold is a moisture problem. So you want to keep your humidity in the safe zone between 40 and 60%. That means you're going to get digital humidity gauges and keep them there. So that also means that you're not humidifying a room without knowing it, right? A lot of people humidify just because it's wintertime or because they think it's dry, but you really shouldn't modify what you don't quantify. So you shouldn't be dehumidifying or humidifying unless you actually know what's going on. The other thing that's really, really helpful for a healthy bedroom is getting a great air purifier. And again, not one that's got kill claims or that zaps or destroys molds or bacteria or anything like that. What you want is a really great filter, which means that a fan is inside and blows air through a filter, air through a medium. And so the most important qualities is that they have to either be HEPA or ULPA. And so high efficiency particulate arrestants, which is 99.75% of all particles. And then ULPA goes to 0.1 microns. So very, very small, like atmospheric dust. So the filtration that takes out the particles, that's first. And then you also want to make sure that you have enough carbon in those filters. So there's the particle filter, and then there's the carbon. The carbon takes out the VOCs. It takes out odors and gases, man-made and microbial. And so units that we really like a lot, I love Medify Air, I love Air Doctor, and I love Jasper. Those three units, those three companies produce air filters that have plenty of carbon and that are very effective at removing particles. And then you also end up with, the benefit of having a little bit of white noise in the bedroom, which tends to be useful for people that are having sleep issues. And of course, I don't need to tell anyone who's listening to your podcast, you got to make sure it's nice and dark. You want to get that, make sure your light is taken care of. But the most important thing also, I would say, is to minimize carpet in a bedroom. And I know everyone wants to have a warm, the warm cozy, but carpet harbors dust, and dust and moisture together is what produces dust mites, which are the enemy of good sleep, as well as the potential for mold growth.
And if you have your own business, you can even do these kits in your business, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be your
Absolutely.
home.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that use them. We have a lot of teachers that use them in their schools because they can't get the schools to do the testing. So, they risk their job, quite frankly, to do that. But they're also risking their lives teaching in a moldy school. I mentioned earlier that my mother took her own life when I was a kid, and that was relevant. And so I didn't start to put the pieces of the puzzle together until the 2008 study, which is what the Brown University study that you mentioned, which they had 6,000 participants, and they asked them essentially, do you have a mold or moisture problem of significance? And then also, how are you feeling? They kind of a quality of life questionnaire with them. And they found a very strong correlation between mold and dampness indoors and depression. Now, they stopped short of being able to say there was a causal relationship because that wasn't the purpose of the study. But they did propose that there might be some disempowerment there, right? Someone who knows they have a mold problem, haven't been able to fix it. That's pretty disempowering. But then they also posed the question, is there a causal link? Is there a chemical or a biological relationship? 2015, I became friends with Dr. Joan Bennett, who's a fungal geneticist at Rutgers University, and she had developed her own. She had had her own mold-related illness because she had a house down in New Orleans that got flooded during Katrina. And she walked into this flood-stricken home, which she called a fungal utopia, wearing a respirator just an N95 respirator, a particle respirator, not one of the, not a vapor mask. And she was hit with the musty smell so strongly that she ended up having to leave the building a few times to get some air, and then eventually just abandon it and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And she was so sickened by it and so surprised by the fact that she had been so sickened by it that she went back and began studying the musty smell. And she started testing these really nifty fruit flies that actually fluoresce when they produce dopamine, which is kind of cool. And it's amazing what you can buy online. And she began testing the musty smell on these fruit flies, and she found that they stopped producing dopamine, they stopped reproducing, they fly down and set it to the light, which is their instinctive nature. They developed Parkinsonian-like symptoms, which is pretty fascinating, and locomotor disorder. And eventually, in subsequent studies, they found that the musty smell developed mitochondrial damage. And so she has proposed that we now call these chemicals, that comprise the musty smell, volatoxins instead of volatile organic compounds, because they're neurotoxic. And so the data points that are starting to emerge from Brown University and Dr. Joan Bennett's work are starting to show that, this epidemic of anxiety and depression, as well as, of course, the brain fog and emotional dysregulation. Mold rage is a thing. People find themselves just like disproportionately reactive when they're living in these environments. And the evidence points to exposure to the musty smell. So, there's three things you can do with an air quality problem. So what do you do? So first of all, source control, and that's remediation, right? So that's not always possible or practical. Budget can be a major issue. You may not be in control of the building if you're renting, but that's the ideal situation: source control or relocation, right? That's number one. Number two is you can dilute, bringing fresh air from outside, right? You can open the windows and sort of ventilate this place out. And again, if it's too hot, too cold, or too humid, that may not be possible or practical. But there are energy recovery ventilators and mechanical air exchange systems that can be installed called ERVs and HRVs, which can be really helpful for stuff like this, and also are useful if you've got a VOC problem, like in a new construction or a newly renovated building where you have that new house smell. That, by the way, that new house smell is toxic. People equate that to this, I've arrived. When I smell that, I smell autoimmune disease. I smell cancer. And so the same thing with a new car smell. I mean, we have positively associated this stuff like Pavlov's dogs, and yet the reality is we have trained ourselves to attribute success to this, and this is the wrong stimulus and response. And so the third thing you can do with an air quality problem is you can filter the air. And filtering the air means having the right kind of filter that will take out the pollutants, as I described earlier. Mold produces toxin, the VOCs, which are gases, and it produces the spores, which are particles. On the spores, you'll find, if there's toxigenic species, you'll find some toxins, but the mycotoxins themselves don't become airborne as easily as people think. But the bottom line is a great air purifier is your best defense in terms of buying time and reducing exposure if you've got an air quality issue. The thing is, I must emphasize that it does not solve the problem. If you live in a moldy place, if there's a mold or moisture problem of significance and you're using air purifiers, look at them as a way to buy time to get you to the point where you can actually do the remediation or relocate, not as a substitute for either one of those.
Right. Hopefully I haven't scared you too much here today, but you want to know if something's happening. And if you're still confused, remember you can go to gotmold.com/braintap. You can download a free book, How to Find Mold in Your Home. And I recommend you download that, do a little research on your own, and then order that kit. They're not very expensive. Geez, and you have a discount coupon there that you can use, the coupon with BrainTap, and you can get set up, see if that's a problem you have. If you don't have any problems, then you're probably fine. But a lot of times people will walk in their home. If your nose starts running as soon as you get home, that's probably a pretty good sign you're having an allergic reaction to your own home. A lot of people do that. Or if you have a lot of phlegm buildup when you're around, those are things your body is trying to tell you something, and just suppressing it isn't going to help. But we're coming to the end of the podcast here today. This has been great information, Jason. But what have I forgot to ask you, or what do you want to reinforce for BrainTap Nation to know about this question? Do you got mold?
Well, what I will say is this in closing. Um, we live in a world where we have very little control over most things. If you're honest, and it's hard for the type A people here listening to this, but the reality is we have very little control. And especially when you're talking about the outdoor environment, which we all should be worried about, but we can do very little about. We can't control China or Russia or India or any of these other, even if we do a great job here, it's still, this is a big world here, and there's a lot of participants. But the indoor environment is an area where you have an enormous potential for control. I mean, you have this unique opportunity to control the air you breathe. And again, you 13 to 15 times a minute, 20,000 times a day, comes out to about 2,000 gallons, which is enough to fill a swimming pool. That's about 30 pounds of air. And if you do the math on that, that's 7 or 8 times as much food or water that you drink. It's your single largest environmental exposure, but it's hiding in plain sight, right under the tip of your nose. And so my suggestion my purpose here is to raise awareness about this so that people begin seeing air as this crucial thing that it is. This is our water, right? If we were fish, this is our water. And so, Oliver Wendell Holmes once said that a mind stretched by a new idea never regains its original dimensions. And so I hope everyone listening to this can't unsee this. That's my wish here today.
Right. Well, I think you've done your job. If you've listened this far through the podcast, they're obviously going to go to gotmold.com, do some more research. It's a problem out there bigger than you think. It's probably in more homes than anyone could imagine, because they're making our homes so they don't breathe anymore. They're sealed up. So once it's sealed in, it's like it's like one of those ant colonies where you watch the ant farm. It's just happening inside our house, and we need to do something about that to get our house breathing again, or get them cleaned out. I recommend that you get to gotmold.com/braintap, do a little more research for yourself, especially if you've tried everything else and you're having nagging problems, especially as it has to do with your immune system, which right now you don't want to mess with. We want to have a really strong, powerful immune system. And this is one of those things, it's almost like having mercury fillings. Back in the day, people thought that was just crazy. No, but nothing's going on. If they start to leak, obviously, if they're sealed off, just like mold, if it's sealed and you're not breathing it in, then you're not gonna be a problem. But the problem is that mold doesn't know how to stay in its place. It's going to go wherever it wants to go. It's going to grow. So go to gotmold.com/braintap, do some research, get the free book. I mean, do some reading, do some research, look around your home. And if it looks like you need that kit, you've got a discount coupon. Let's get your home healthy, get your brain healthy. And Jason, I want to thank you for spending some time here. I know that you're a busy man out there making people aware of this problem. I'm sure a lot of people, when you're walking around the events and you got the t-shirt on that says got mold, people are wondering, what in the heck is this guy talking about? But I appreciate what you're doing, because being in the neuroscience world, a lot of times it's one of the first tests we tell people. They've got to go out and look, because you want to get rid of the environmental toxins. You can't just think your way to being healthy if you're constantly being bombarded, because like you said, the mold doesn't care. It's going to be there spewing its spores and doing its gases, and it's just, it's got evolution on its side, and you're sitting there trying to fight it when you don't have to fight it. You can, and I love the fact that you don't have to kill it with all of these different other things that are also just as toxic, or maybe even, I didn't know that they were more toxic. When I read that, I'm like, they actually start to fight. I mean, these molds have an intelligence. So, do the research, find out if you've got mold in your home. If you have it in your home, then you probably have it in your brain, and we want to clear that out. Your body is designed to heal. Your brain is designed to heal, but we need to get rid of the environmental toxins. And the same way you might look at EMF and protecting yourself, or getting enough sunshine or grounding, this is a big factor. This is something you can do. Like Jason was saying, you have control over the air in your own home. So again, Jason, thank you for being on the Brain Fitness Podcast, bringing people hope and health through remediation and getting their mold put into place and getting their air air is important, guys. I mean, we talk about all the time, breathing techniques are part of brain tap, but you don't want to be doing breathing techniques in a mold-filled environment. You're just exacerbating the problem. So we want to get the brain healthy, get your body healthy, get your life healthy. So again, Jason, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Dr. Porter.
All right, tune in. And anyone you know that is maybe having some issues that are unexplainable, I can tell you, I have met so many people over the years that unexplainable problems, and they found out it was something as simple as mold. Once they remediated that mold, their body started to heal because it's designed to do that. So let's take this one off the list. Please like and share. Get this out to as many people as you can. Get them to use the code. Get them to go there and get that free book. Let's help the world become mold-free and get people healthy again. So again, tune in to the next Brain Fitness podcast, where we're giving you tips and tricks to improve your brain and your life through physical, mental, and spiritual practices. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on our mission to better a billion brains. Follow at Dr. Patrick Porter on social media for updates, and remember to practice brain fitness every day.